with Jessica Taghap, a new podcast exploring different art forms and their creative processes through interviews with some of the most exciting artists working today. This week's episode has me sitting down over Zoom with interdisciplinary artist in residence, María and Mafe Izaguirre, on the first of two conversations. Born in Venezuela, Mafe eventually settled in New York, where her work in cybernetics seeks to explore the ways in which humans and technology cooperate to amplify consciousness. In anticipation of her multimedia performance, The Post-Poetic Machine, we talked about Mafe's background in the sciences and visual arts, and her intention behind her latest piece. And with that, let's start the show. I guess let's start from the beginning and sort of I'd like to know a little bit more about like your background, where you're from, how you sort of first got into the arts, and we can take it from there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Jessica, for your time, for your interest, and for the space. I really appreciate it. Well, I come from, my background is in visual arts. I studied first visual arts, and then I studied graphic design, but I specialized in multimedia at that time. We're talking about the late 90s. So I come from, digital media all the time. I have been working with digital media. And the thing about computers, or how I got into computers, like since I'm a child, I love computers. Like the first computer that arrived to my home was an Apple IIc in 1986.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm not that young. um, I'm 46. Um, so my grandfather brought it to the house, and at that time, adults didn't even know how to use the computers. So I was very curious about it. Of course, I was like forbidden to use it because they thought I was going to break it, but I didn't, like follow the rules. And and I began to play with it. And I was so fascinated by, that box that has so many amazing things to discover. So I silently sat down every afternoon to play with that until my mom discovered I was using it.
Mhm.
And at the end, I was the one who taught everybody in the family how to use it. Um, but one thing that I think that is the reason why I'm bringing that memory is because my grandfather bought me like illustrator books for kids about how computer works.
Mhm.
And I think that was the beginning of the charm for me, because it was like an entire universe of things, from the memory RAM and the CPU and all these things. I thought it was such a fantastic thing. So I got, I think, enamored of machines. And then when I studied, of course, I learned all the traditional media like painting, different sculpture techniques, and all that. But I was passionate about web design, and how to do not only commercial work for digital media, but also how I was very interested in the concept of how internet was going to impact, society, the future. At that time, I remember 2000, no, in the 2000s to 2001, um, the projections of having a personal artificial intelligence assistant was projected for 2040. So we are now living that reality, right? Like
Right.
AI is everywhere, is an assistant for everything. So, at that moment, I was wondering like how the world is going to be, how this is going to be, like, what does this mean? So, I have been asking questions about technology and how I assimilate technology and how we all as society assimilate technology from the very beginning. I think when I was studying visual arts, I was the first generation that uh, lived that transition from analogic medium to digital. So I learned both worlds. And the generation that came after me was, of course, 100% digital. So that was a really interesting transition. And I think my work today reflects a little bit that. And that's why it's interdisciplinary and it makes different media also. So yeah, I think it comes from that. And in terms of my cultural background and my ethnicity, I come from Venezuela. I was born in Venezuela in 1978, and I lived all my life there until 2016. That I decided to come to New York because I wanted to have, like pursue continuing education in digital techniques, specifically digital fabrication techniques, because we didn't have that in Venezuela. I mean, of course, my country has been through a lot, not only the economy and the politics and social crisis, but technologically talking, we have a really big gap. So we didn't have access to, for example, microcontrollers, LEDs, nothing of this existed there. So when I came to New York on vacations, I saw that it was a possibility to get into a continuing education program in Cooper Union, and I planned and did that. So I arrived in 2016. My plan was to stay 3 years and come back, but I'm still here. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's a little bit the story.
Wow. Yeah. So, you definitely are coming in at it at a very sort of unique um intersection, I guess, a unique perspective. Um, so tell me a little bit about the show that you're having at Theater Lab and sort of what inspired you um, I guess, what inspired the project and what you hope people will take away from it.
Yeah. Well, the show that I'm presenting in Theater Lab that opens on November 4th is a laboratory. I think that's the best definition. I'm exploring post-poetics, which means that actually it's like a language laboratory. And the part that I'm researching is the hardest areas of language, meaning, for example, recurrent thoughts, repetitions, like all the things that we can relate to mechanical processes. Like I try to find in myself and my routines, my behaviors, my thoughts, my speech, all these repetitions and loops that in some way related me with the processes that machines have and in that exploration this post-poetic machine arose. So I was working with a Venezuelan poet. Her name is Eleonora Requena, and we had like I had a mentorship with her for 8 months, and we were talking about having conversations about poetics and this dimension of language, the machinery aspect of language, and And that's when I began to do these experiments with visualization, because I wanted to create a way to see, to visualize aspects of language that we usually can, I mean, we perceive it, but it's very difficult to grasp. For example, the amplitude, you know, that the cadence that poetry has, even speaking has, the rhythm, you know, how important is the silence, how much amplitude and how much a space something can take, you know, a word and a sound can take. So I was interested in these things because I thought that if I was going to use a machine for something, it was going to be able to perceive or reach something that as a human I cannot reach or do, you know, like let's say like an amplification of my cognitive capacities and my perception abilities, so, or capacity. So yeah, in doing these experiments, I found these ideas, and I began to create prototypes. And of course, I wanted to share that with more people, because I think it's a very interesting experiment that get you to think a lot about communication, especially interspecies communication, or how we are present, you know, because I live in New York, and this city has a murmur, right? It has a sound, you know, the police siren, the subway, people talking, walking. There's like a murmuring, and you get into that and you interact with that, and all of the sudden, you know, like a bird chirps and you get your attention to that. So you are dialoguing all the time with the environment. And yeah, and I wanted to recreate that. So in the process of researching this and exploring these areas, I became aware of that. And that's what I'm bringing to the room, you know, as that space, like abstracted a little bit. And it's interesting because there's a mix of things like traditional poetry with concrete poetry. Um, of course, there's technology involved, but there's a lot of philosophical thought behind it and experimentation. And there's one part that is very important for me, that is audience participation, because it's not only me using the machines, it's also in the interaction of people with these objects and this environment that we can discover things together. So I think that that's the most valuable thing. So Theater Lab is strategic to that. Like Orieta from the very beginning has supported my work and understood that the importance of the audience participation. So that's what I'm bringing, opening the space for that. Yeah.
That's definitely an interesting sort of concept, and sort of the contrast between spoken word, something natural with something very machine-like, and very interesting, given the fact that machines sort of have their own syntax, their own sort of language that you have to input into them. Not to sort of like, I mean, you can give away as much or as little as you want, but in the show itself, how will that look like in terms of how the poetry will interact with the technology?
Mhm. Well, that's a very interesting question because there is different layers or different dimensions of language. So there's one dimension, let's say, is the more abstract one, that is the electromagnetic communication that we have with the environment. So there is a group of machines that dialogue in that dimension with us. So with you only have to be present in the room, and these machines are electromagnetic machines, and they sense you, and they react to that, to your presence, to any vibration in the space. So that's one level, for example, of dialogue there, and the poetic expression is in them is movement and color. So it's very, very abstract. Then there's another group of machines that are those are, I call them sensitive machines. Then there is another group of machines that are the post-poetic machines that are like magical boxes, let's say, where you can see the visualization of this environmental dialogue between different symbols. So you can see, for example, things like a whale and a washer machine coexisting.
Oh,
Yeah. So it's really interesting because you don't know exactly what is going to happen. I mean, we cannot predict exactly what is going to be the symbols that are going to appear, and they they just like get into the space, and it's really interesting the experiences that you can have from that. For example, when I was testing the machines, I had one machine and a bird appeared, right? Like the sound of the bird, and you can see, all this visual representation of that. And other machine where was presenting the sound of or the noise that the wind does when you record it with a microphone. So when they came together, you actually can feel like you are a bird flying. I mean, for a moment, you get into that situation. So like that, there are many, many moments that get you to think about, try to identify what you're hearing, but also to create meaning from it, which is the poetic aspect of it, right? So there's like a technical aspect of it that is the metrics, all these, the graphic that the machine produces, all the rhythm, the cadence, the structure, let's say, is very technical if we're talking about poetics. But there is this other aspect that is the meaning. So with that, there's another another group of machines that are also in the scene, and we're gonna have. Well, I'm gonna be the first performance that is gonna explore all this with the audience, and then there's gonna be other three performers. Yoko Murakami on Wednesday 6. She's gonna be working with movement and the space. She's fantastic. Her work is very poetic. She can really present a dialogue with the space that is very unique. Her work is beautiful. So I'm very curious about how she's going to interact with all this environment that is so hybrid. And then we have on Saturday we have Peter Cicioli. He's going to work with the voice. His research is about the voice as a movement, and how the body and the voice, or the bodies is like the voice is an extension of the body movement. So that is also going to be really interesting because these machines are also sensitive to sound. So we're having different explorations. Yoko with movement, I will be more about the interaction and the consciousness of it, and Peter is going to be more about voice and movement. And last, we will have Enrique Enriquez, that he's a Venezuelan poet too, and he's exploring the bird talk, like the sounds of the birds as poetic object, and I think his performance is like a dream. I mean, really, you get transported to a very different dimension of things. So yeah, so that's very much what we will have. Of course, I mean, I really think that people need to see this in person to really get it, because the experience is so difficult to describe. It's so complex, and everybody experienced something, and that's the beauty of it. At the end, we share. So it's really, really beautiful to listen to every single experience, what every person brought to the table, and yeah, so that's a hope.
Yeah, that definitely sounds interesting in terms of, yeah, marrying all these different human and non-human ways of
Mhm.
communication and marrying it with the technological aspect. Um, can you talk a little bit about your process in terms of getting all of these other different artists together? What was that like? How did you know to reach out to each of them? What was your relationship to each of them? And what was the process sort of discovering what each of their sort of performances would look like um, for each one, and what it would look like with the cybernetics?
Mhm. Well, so yeah, I mean, I can begin saying that I think this is like a matter of presence. So one of the things that we discussed together, I mean, that I discussed with each of them, was that it's really difficult to rehearse. I mean, you can come, you can see what's happening, but you really need to be present at the moment in order to have a conversation with this environment. So we all uh, agreed, and in some way, that um, the less they knew about how these things work, the better, because they can explore and discover, instead of like instead of having like a rational relationship with the object or the environment, is more like a sensitive or a matter of presence. So that was a big topic that we all discussed. Um,
So
in
nothing
each
is particularly like choreographed in a certain way or
No,
scripted in a certain way. Okay.
no, no, because I mean the machines are unpredictable. I don't know how they're gonna react or how they're
Mhm.
gonna behave. Even the machines that have this sound memory that I has been recording for a year, they are random. So I don't know exactly when they're gonna play what. So there's this component of the unknown. We are all jumping into the unknown, and that was
Yeah.
exciting for each of us. Like when we were having the conversation, we were like, well, is you have that that tension that you don't really know how to create sense of this. And I think that's a challenge of poetry. I mean, when you are putting together something, you don't really know until it happened, and you sort of like flow with it and get into it. So it's very experimental in that sense. In terms of the relationship, well, Enrique has been my mentor for, I don't know, more than 20 years. He was my thesis tutor when I graduated. And he's, of course, like a long friend, and we have conversations. He usually has like a spot in Chelsea that he always goes there and meet. And we had these these meetings, this coffee that we talk about all this abstraction and language and meaning, and from his perspective and from my perspective. So it has been really interesting because for example, he since 2020 he began to record himself with these bird apparatus that bird watchers use to call the birds. And I mean, I can say that probably is like it in the concept, or in the way that happenings happen. He went to a specific corner in New York, in Manhattan, and he recorded a sound. And during 4 years, he sent that sound not only to me, to a group of people, but I organized them from each date, and I produce a catalog of that with the poetic machine. So you're going to be able to see all these sounds and their graphics. So it has been a constant dialogue with him, has been a very deep dialogue about poetics. Then with Peter, I met Peter because I went to movement research. He was having a workshop there called the sounding body. And I was really interested in that because I was actually working with my machines and vibration. So I loved his workshop. His work is fantastic. And since then, that was 2020. And since then, I have been following his work and getting, as much as I can close to what he's doing. So I thought it was really interesting. I really wanted the audience to experience that I experienced in his workshop, but in the scenario of these machines too. So to see how that conversation can spark other things, so it's really interesting. With Peter, you can find sounds in your body that you are not aware you have, like
Really?
areas. Yeah, like he's incredible. So it's like it's a very personal but also communal experience. Is interesting in that way. Then with Joko, I met Joko through Theater Lab, because I'm the artist in residence this year. So as part of the program, we are meeting like different artists from the community, and I really love her work. I mean, I was captivated by her performances. I don't even know how to describe it. It's like I just got it. I saw her work and I got it. I got that she was dialoguing with something that we cannot see, but she makes it feasible. So I was like, yes, we're talking about the same thing from two very different perspectives, but at the end, we are looking for the same material, So that's really exciting. I mean, it's the first time that I'm going to work with her, but I'm really, really, really excited about this collaboration because I think I'm going to be part of the audience that they enjoy in her work. So yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like it will be an interesting experience as someone who has conceived a show and then to sort of collaborate with someone and see what they'll do with it when they take the helm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a very unique experience as an artist. Um, in terms of collaboration, um, in general, how have you felt as an artist about collaborating, the whole process of it? Apart from this project, sort of, had you had much experience with collaborating on other projects prior? And how do you feel that sort of helped shape you as an artist?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the work that I do is so technical that in that sense, I'm a solo artist. But I will say that since YouTube and GitHub, and Reddit exist,
Mm-hmm.
I cannot fully say that I'm a solo artist in that way because sometimes I have an idea. I want a machine that does this and I don't know how to do it. And I go and I Google it and I found someone else doing something close to it that gives me some clues about the path that I should follow, or a recommendation about one device instead of another. So I think that's a collaboration there. Even if you don't know the person, there's so much that I have been able to do because that, virtual community exists.
Right.
So that's one big collaboration that I always have. Then the particular collaboration, for example, for this show, I'm also working with a sound engineer that is helping me create like the quadraphonic sound, and to work also with you know other types of layers of sounds, because I recorded for a year sounds in my environment, but I'm also bringing Creative Commons sounds of things that I couldn't record. For example, ape in Malaysia. I don't know,
Mm.
something that I don't have access to it. But this is another community that is there, that they're creating materials for other artists to create too. So I love that. I mean, I'm a big part of, or I'm a big, not well, not only part, but like um, I don't have the word, but promoter. I'm a big promoter of the collaboration in that sense. Then there's probably this other layer of collaboration with the audience, that the audience is not passive.
Mm-hmm.
So in some way, I'm
Right.
requesting them, to
Mm-hmm.
be present and to act. So
Yeah, and it
that's
sounds like
also
with this production, each performance will, the audience participation will contribute something different every night. And theater is
exactly,
different every night anyway.
exactly.
So
Mhm.
that'll be also interesting to see.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't know exactly what the experience is going to be, because depending on the people that comes together and what happened there, something is going to appear and some others don't. So that's a big collaboration for me. Like, even in things that I cannot see while I'm creating the work, because
Mhm.
I'm just bringing my experience, what I can see, what I can perceive, what I can imagine. But then there is all these other people, other perspective and worlds that, I mean, every time that I present my work, it really fits the work. I mean, the work is a constant evolution of that. And last but not least, I will say that this time in this project, for the first time, I use AI. I use AI for debug my code, because that's the hardest part when you are coding and some error appears and you are like, oh my God,
Right.
3 weeks to fix, a comma that you don't see, that is not there. And that was a big help, like to be able to, to debug faster was fantastic. So I will say that this job or this project, more than a job, but this project has that component that I also find it interesting. I when I decided to do it, I was like, yes, is the time for the machine, to come in that sense too. It makes sense, So it was fun. It was interesting to bring that component this time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
AI. I mean, it's coming whether we all like it or not, and that
Yeah.
definitely is an interesting aspect to the whole technological side of the project. Yeah, it'll be definitely interesting to see. Yeah, I think I would love to talk with you more after the November 4th performance, which I'll be attending.
Okay.
And
That's
maybe I'll try to
fantastic.
attend the Q&A performance as well. But I would love to see if we can like sit down again and chat again once I've seen it, and hopefully I'll have more questions for you then. But I
Yeah.
think for now, I think I've gotten a good sort of grasp on the background of the project.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. It
Yeah.
sounds great. So yeah,
Thank
so
you.
thank you for
No,
sitting with me today.
thank you so much, Jessica. And I'm sure that it's gonna happen. I mean, after the performance, it's gonna be, we're gonna have to be contained, because it produces so much, like
Mhm.
for you, for me, for anybody here. It's gonna happen, that we're gonna want to talk about all the things that we are thinking, feeling, experiencing. So yeah, it will be really, really interesting. So I can wait for that moment.
You can follow Mafe Izaguirre on Instagram at Hybrid Spiritual Systems, as well as get updates through her website at mafeizaguirre.com. Cultivate is produced, presented, and conceived by Jessica Taghap and is a resident artist production. Our intro music is by Boden Kuzman, and our outro is by Taffy Rhythm. New episodes are available every week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Substack. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Cultivate Pod and get updates on residentartist.substack.com. I'm Jessica Taghap, and until next time, keep on creating.